be open to change, be open to listening to peers and getting um, tips and suggestions from other people that are in your same profession capacity. Um, I think that's where I've learned the most. Is not only what to do, but what to avoid. And then most recently, of course, we implemented or Talkie.ai, sorry. And and through all these changes, I have a 90-day rule. The first
Okay.
30 days, it's gonna be like banging your head against the wall. Everybody's gonna buck, everybody's gonna complain. It's the worst thing ever. Why did you do this? I like the old way. 60 days, it gets less complaints, and then by the 90 days, the complaints are few and far between. Both of our offices have the waiting rooms closed, because we realized that a lot of the complaints we would get about waiting rooms were that, we have toys in there which have germs, and then so new babies or people that weren't babies or children that weren't fully vaccinated or getting exposed to illnesses. So, we just have opted to keep our waiting rooms closed. We actually converted our waiting room space into additional exam rooms. So, I'm a CPA, so I like money. So I always said, you don't make money in the waiting room, you make money in the exam room. So we added 3 exam rooms, um, where the waiting room was. And if you're not getting patients scheduled, you're not getting any revenue. So we need to keep the patient visits coming in, and
Right.
that needs to be done by people that, you know, at least like their job or are, friendly, um, customer service oriented. I look for when I'm hiring somebody that has had customer service experience, not necessarily medical experience, because I'm going to tell you some of my best hires have been people that have been in retail. Bartenders are really good. Waitresses
Oh,
are
okay.
really good. Um, because they have to deal with all kinds of things. So they can typically handle somebody that's nasty on the phone.
Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to Scaling Practice Management, the show where we help practice managers grow smarter, not harder. My name is Jakob Greisar. I'm the head of marketing at Talkie.ai, where we help medical practices stop the phone from ringing off the hook and unburden their front desk team with our AI medical receptionist agents. And we're already helping 300,000 patients every month. My guest today is Leasa Horst, CPA. Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me
Yeah.
here today.
Yeah. That's so. I'm really, really pleased to have you on the show. Not our first interview, as we're about to mention, but we'll get to that. Is this your first podcast appearance?
Yes, it is. I'm an old woman, so yes.
And how are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
Like I said, I'm gonna wing this one.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a prep, in terms of sharing the questions, etc. But okay, I'm sure we're in for a great conversation. So, a couple of words about you, Lisa, as we begin, for the watchers and listeners to understand who's coming on the show today. Lisa is the practice administrator at ESD Pediatric Group, a 2-location pediatric practice in the Cincinnati area that's been caring for families for over 80 years. And out of those 80 years, Lisa has been with the practice for over 30 years. We are here to talk about leading a team through change and what it actually takes to bring new technology into a busy front desk, because ESD and Lisa are also a client of Talkie.ai, so that's definitely going to be part of the conversation as well. Excellent. So, with that out of the way, there's 2 podcast traditions, Lisa, that we typically go through, and the first is the warm-up game. Are you ready to play the warm-up game?
Sure.
Okay, so the first step of the warm-up game is please pick 3 numbers from 1 to 10.
8, 4, and 2.
2, 4, and 8. You just picked 3 categories, and you're gonna pick one, and I'm gonna ask you a question. The categories you picked are food, fun, and book. Which one do you want?
Food, fun, and what was the last one?
The book was the last one.
Um, let's do fun.
Fun, okay. Well, so this is one that I used to ask on the show all the time, but let's bring back an old classic. What is the most fun thing you've done this year thus far?
Thus far this year, The most fun thing I've done is go on a beach trip with one of my best friends.
Okay, so how was that? Was that more of, just lying on the beach with some cocktails, or what did you do?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Is that a friend that you've known for a long time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, a
It's really,
long
really
time.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what if I asked you for the most fun thing you've done, just period? At least, the kind that you can share on the show, I suppose, like,
Oh,
if we
yeah.
go further back.
I guess it was last year we, went with another couple, my husband and I went with another couple to Ireland. So we did
Oh,
the Wild Atlantic Way, which was an interesting experience. Beautiful countryside, way too much rain for my taste. I like more, sunshine, but we we had a really good time.
okay. So what was your favorite thing about Ireland?
Actually, probably the coast, the Cliffs of Moher, that was beautiful. We did a boat down and went around the Cliffs of Moher, so we got up close and personal. Apparently, there was a part of the cliffs that was in Harry Potter, as my children told me.
Ah,
So,
cool.
they were all excited when I sent those pictures. They knew exactly where what it was, but, so
Huh.
that was
I
kinda
think
cool.
I think I might recall the scene, but very, very vaguely. I would have to review the movies again to
Yeah,
to check. That's awesome, and that means we have something in common. I visited Ireland in, I think it was 2023. It was Cork, just the city of Cork. We were meeting with some companies there from my previous company, but I really liked the experience. And hey, I had my first pint of Guinness. Well, not first ever, but the first one in Ireland.
yeah.
Felt very authentic. We went to a
Well,
pub
do
and
were
all
you
that.
able to split the G?
Split the G? What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, like your first drink of Guinness, you drink it down between the Harp and the Guinness, and you split the G. That's a
Oh,
thing.
I never tried that. I
Yeah.
will with my next pint of Guinness. See?
Yes.
I learn
Yeah.
something new every
Yeah.
time on the show. I love it. I love it. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for playing the warm-up game. And I think that the answer was amazing. You landed on this classic, the most fun thing this year thus far. It's so funny because today, when we're recording it, it's July 1st, so it's like right in the middle point of the year. So
Yeah.
the question was great, if I do say so myself. Anyway, for the second scaling practice management tradition, before we launch into anything else, the question that you get is the question everybody else gets, and I'm really curious about your answer. Lisa, what is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice?
Be open to change. Be open to listening to peers and getting tips and suggestions from other people that are in your same profession capacity. I think that's where I've learned the most is not only what to do, but what to avoid. So I
Mm,
think that's a really good way. And then you need to value your people too. We do, I think, overall a pretty good job of helping our employees have a good work to life balance. We offer 4-day work weeks. We also offer some of the positions that aren't patient for or don't have patient interactions. They are allowed to have a hybrid schedule where they can work from home or work in the office. That started a lot with COVID, but we are one of the few practices here in the Cincinnati area that have continued that, for our staff, and I think that really helps with, uh, the the burnout and frustration that can come with working in the front line of a pediatric practice.
okay, that's amazing. Actually, that's already a lot of threads to pull on, and I'm excited to start digging deeper. So let's start from the top. You mentioned talking with peers, okay? So take us into that conversation. What I mean is, okay, in my experience, I know it's a good idea to talk with peers, but I have two problems. One is how to find them, where to actually have a natural conversation with them. And then two, how to actually run that conversation. Because oftentimes for myself, it's quite dry. So, what do you do? So, what do you do? What have you been working on? Do you have any sort of formula of what you usually ask about or how you find the peers to talk with?
Yeah, luckily, here in the Cincinnati market, we are part of a physician health organization that has, I believe we have 28 or more pediatric practices joined. We have bi-monthly meetings with the office managers, and we're given an agenda before the meeting, and so we're prompted, on what's going to be the topics that are foremost with other practices. And then at the end, we bring up issues that might not be on the agenda but are pressing for us right now. So that's really helpful. There's also like you can look online. There's webinars that are pediatric specific. Um, I utilize those a lot during COVID, because we went from seeing patients to not seeing patients, but we had to
Right.
still keep the doors open. So you know, a lot of there were a lot of good tidbits of how to pivot during that time. And we were actually able to maintain all of our staffing where some practices had to lay off people. We didn't lay off anyone. We paid everyone, and we just pivoted to trying to bring in because we're pediatrics, babies are stillborn. So
Right.
we make conformed our operations to make it a safe environment for newborns to come in. One of the things that we did during COVID was we closed the waiting rooms. Patients waited in the car. We implemented a texting system so that when they arrived at the office, they would text in that they arrived. And actually, we've continued that. We keep our both of our offices have the waiting rooms closed because we realize that a lot of the complaints we would get about waiting rooms or that, we have toys in there which have germs. And then so new babies or people that weren't babies or children that weren't fully vaccinated or getting exposed to illnesses. So we just have opted to keep our waiting rooms closed. So
Wow.
we continued that, and I think overall we actually converted our waiting room space into additional exam rooms. So, I'm a CPA, so I like money. So I always said, you don't make money in the waiting room, you make money in the exam room. So we added 3 exam rooms where the waiting room was.
That is such an amazing quote. I'm a CPA, so I like money. But more than that, you already shared so much like good tactical advice. I love this. Honestly, I love this, and I need to now pick kind of what to pull on a little bit more. So, tell me more about these meetings that you mentioned, the bi-monthly meetings, because I wonder. I think for somebody who's in a similar position to yours, and we're definitely talking to your peers as well with this podcast episode, right?
Right.
What are some of the issues that are being brought up, especially during that open slot at the end where you can bring your own issues, and how are they being addressed? So what's top of mind right now?
Well, top of mind with a lot of practices, it's the political climate here in the United States where suddenly science isn't valued anymore. And a lot of people are opting to not vaccinate or want to do alternative schedules for vaccinations, which our practice has embraced the AAP, the uh, American Academy of Pediatrics advice of counseling and not and treating, not denying treatment for these kids, where a lot of practices in our area several years ago, if you weren't fully vaccinated or following the AAP CDC schedule, they were making the patients leave their practice. So we
Uh,
gained patients. Now those practices are feeling the brunt of this climate where they're not getting new patients or they're
mm,
not able to accept them because they're not fully vaccinated. So they're really reaching out to me to see how we do this and what it has done for our practice. So there are still hardline practices that will not see the patient unless they're fully vaccinated, but there are more and more practices that realize they need to adapt to the current environment. That's really been top of mind. The other thing that's really top of mind are the denials and the takebacks that insurance companies are doing in the United States. They're taking back money from 2 or 3 years ago, and it's not just one carrier, it's across the board. So there's a lot of discussion about that because, you know, our costs continue to go up, but
mm.
reimbursement for insurance carriers do not match the inflation. That's a big part. There's also a lot of human resource topics we talk about, you know,
Right.
like helping maintaining your current force population because a lot of practices have a lot of what's that word? Not
Turnover?
yeah, yeah, exactly. That
Got it.
turnover, yeah, um, so that we talk about that a lot. Um, Also, if there's, like, new codes that are presented, like, that typically happens in December, those meetings at the end of the year when new codes are being, introduced, how how those are gonna be incorporated into the fee schedule and things like that. So that's pretty
Yeah.
much it can run anywhere, but I would say that's the top 3 or 4 things that are top of mind right now.
Yes, thank you for sharing all of that. And definitely, it's important to know the size of the challenge faced by practice administrators like you, or the many challenges actually in this case. And I wanted to dig deeper into just one more thing before we move on to other sections of the conversation, so to speak. You mentioned some of the benefits for your team members, right? Like 4-day work weeks or a hybrid schedule. What would you say to somebody who's got, I think, the usual objection of, oh, as as soon as we allow them to have these comforts, they get used to it, they get a little bit, spoiled, and then, how to actually strike that balance so it works for both sides.
Yeah, and that does happen. People begin to be comfortable, take advantage of the situation,
Hmm,
but typically, if that's an issue, it's really usually isolated to 1 or 2 people, and
right.
that can be addressed by calling them in and saying, like, for example, if they're abusing the hybrid schedule because the partners want the staff to be at least have 1 person in office every day. So if it's their day to be in office and they're constantly, "Oh, I didn't set my alarm. I'll be late if I come in, but can I work from home?"
Right.
That I bring that person in, and this has happened. I bring the person in and I say, "Look, the rule is," and we also have in our handbook, the rules, the guidelines for the work from home, what has to happen for that to continue. Um, and I'm not gonna take it away from everyone for one bad apple. So I'll just bring them in and say, I usually will give them a warning, like, "Look, you're supposed to have been in office the last 3 Wednesdays, you haven't been here at all. If you make 1 more change or 2 more changes, what depending on the situation, I'm gonna take that away, and you'll have to be in office all the time."
Yeah.
Once they get that threat, they typically change and will conform to the schedule because it's not really that much to ask a person to come into the office 1 day a week,
Yeah.
So, um there are there are situations where there could be personal issues going on, and I do take that into effect. I've always said while I've been in this position that, yeah, this is a job, but your family and your life take priority over any job. So I
Yeah.
will consider ex you know, personal situations. I've been told I'm probably flexible to a fault with them, but
I
it
see.
does help keep people happy. I mean, everybody has to work, but it doesn't have to be horrible. So
Yeah, exactly. I
I
mean,
like
this
I
is
like to
uh,
stress the, balance, work-life balance. I think that makes people overall happier, and they tend to stay longer. I mean, we have pretty good longevity here. We just celebrated someone that's been with the practice 30 years, 25 years, and we recognize those milestones at a summer event every year. So I
mm,
think we do a lot to help um, our employees feel not only valued but respected. But
yeah,
also
yeah,
you have to get respect, you have to give respect. So I'm big on that as well. So if there's conflict amongst team members, I'll bring them in and they'll be complaining, and then I'll just look at them like, "You guys aren't respecting each other, and you can't expect somebody to respect you if you're not respecting them."
Yeah, it's true.
So
It goes a long way, right? Respect
right,
and a positive attitude as well. I mean, I'm
right,
trying to work on that on my end these days where I've noticed about myself, I started to get a little bit negative, and then when you give positivity to other people, they tend to give it back. And can I just say additionally, that you're touching upon something here that I think is recognizable to any leader. There's a balance, right? And it's not glamorous. It's like day-to-day decisions of, okay, you want to be flexible and support your team, but sometimes you have to be firm, right? You have to
right,
remind them of the rules for the benefit of all, right? Because if you don't, then nobody really knows where the guardrails or where the rules actually land, right?
right. Well, and then I mean, and if you don't take that somewhat hard line with people, you know everybody knows Susie calls in every Monday, you know, and what's gonna
Mm,
happen to Susie? Nobody Nothing happens to Susie, but, a lot of times people don't know what the backstory of what is happening to Susie, um, but you but
right,
that negativity, I equate it to a weed in the garden. If you have a bunch of weeds in your garden, they're just gonna take over the whole garden, so you have
right.
to either cut the weed or you have to control the weeds. So I typically try to control them before I cut them, but
Yeah,
sometimes the
yeah.
weed has to go.
I understand, and I think a lot of leaders are going to relate to that too. So speaking of backstory, you mentioned that just now. Let's talk a little bit about yours. Can you tell me more about ESD, your role? As we mentioned, you've been there for more than 30 years. So how has the practice changed over that time? And your
Yeah,
role, and
well
what does it look like day to day these days?
yeah. Well, my role when I first started here, I was just a outside accountant coming in,
Uh,
doing their quarterly work. I was I worked with a lot of practice office managers before I got this role. So I've seen like the practice has grown exponentially since I've been in this role. When I first started, there were only 5 doctors. We had we had 2 locations, but the one location went through a major setback when one of the partners left with a whole bunch of patients.
oh,
So our second office went from being a thriving big office to we were seeing maybe 7 patients a day.
okay,
And then that happened. Then in 2007, we moved, and now both offices we went from 5 providers till we have 14 now. 2 offices, we have 18 exam rooms at each office. So we have a really high number. Went from the beginning of time before there was even electronic medical records. We were doing everything with paper charts back in the
okay,
day. So we had walls and walls of paper charts. So I went through that whole transition of going from paper to electronic medical records. At the time, we had he was a partner. He swore he was never going to do electronic medical records.
uh,
We
uh,
went with Athena. I'm gonna give Athena a plug. We went with Athena, and then within 2 or 3 weeks of being on Athena, he came up to me. He goes, "I never want to see a piece of paper again." So, I mean, things, people change, everything changes, but I mean, it's when you think about 30 years ago how you did things to now, it's just night and day.
I should make a note that last thing you said to send that to our partners at Athena because we're integrated with them as well.
Right.
Yeah, maybe you'll get featured in their newsletter or something. Uh, yeah, that's amazing. So definitely, there was a lot of change over the course of that time. So I guess part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show in the first place is you said some very interesting things during our last conversation about what I guess most people would call change management, right? And I would love to capture that on this podcast as well. Can you tell me about your approach? Because you saw a lot of change over that time. Your approach towards change management, how to get people used to, either implementing EHRs or, in our case, implementing an AI front desk. What's your approach to that? How do you make those changes stick, and how do you lead your team through it?
I mean, luckily, myself and our partners, we would like to be on the forefront of technology.
Mm,
So I'm always looking and they're always looking for new ways to improve and work with technology, not work against technology. So like you said, we have electronic medical records. Went through that. Um, we implemented the texting when patients arrive um, at the office, closing the exam rooms. Um, Most recently, um, we went to well, we we went to pre-visit check-in where all we've automated all the forms so that that can be done before the patient enters the office, getting rid of a lot of paper. And then most recently, of course, we implemented Talkie.ai, sorry. And and through all these changes, and I shared this the last time, I have a 90-day rule. The first
okay.
30 days, it's gonna be like banging your head against the wall. Everybody's gonna buck. Everybody's gonna complain. It's the worst thing ever. Why did you do this? I like the old way. 60 days, it gets less complaints, and then by the 90 days, the complaints are few and far between. But in order for that 90-day rule to work, you have to start at the beginning with your staff. You have to have meetings with all the team members that it's going to impact. Like with EMR, it was across the board. So we had multiple meetings before we started even the implementation, letting them know what was happening, what we anticipated was going to happen. And then we always just reinforce that this is a plan. Plans change, things happen, so it's not stuck in stone. If we tell you it's gonna be ABC today, and tomorrow we come back and say, "Oh, no, ABC doesn't work, we have to do CBA," that's what we're
Mhm,
gonna do. We're gonna pivot and make it work, so you have to get buy-in from first. Like, if I present it to the partners, I have to get buy-in from the partners, then the partners have to have that buy-in, and it has to work from the top down, and I think we've been able to do that over the course of my career pretty effectively with the changes. I would say we're one of the probably most tech savvy advanced practices, in the city. I mean, like, years ago, we used to have phone staff, front desk staff that were at both offices answering phones by location only. Well, then when we went to EMR, we realized that patients didn't have to just go to one practice because their charts were available
mhm,
electronically. So if a patient from the other office location wanted to come here or vice versa, we could do that. So we went from this this location versus that location to a whole practice philosophy, and I did central phones at that time, where all the phones numbers we had two separate lines back in the day, but then
mhm.
we just rolled them to one main number, and then eventually we got rid of the second line. So well, we that's one of the things that we've done that helped not only the practice, but it also helped, the patients because they had flexibility as to where they could go.
Absolutely understood. So I think I would love to have a clearer picture of these conversations that you mentioned, right? There's the 30, the 60, and the 90 days. I suppose the first 30 is the hardest out of that, right? So take us into if I could ask you, take us into those conversations. As in, somebody does come up to you and they say, "This is the worst thing ever. This is never gonna work. Is there any way we can cancel this?" Right? How do you usually respond? What do you usually hear, and how do you usually respond? What are some of your go-to,
A lot of times it's like, "Why are you doing this? We like the old way." Well, when they come up with that, I mean, the best response is, "Yeah, the old way did work, that, we're always looking to improve, so we're gonna give this option, this whatever, a try, and, if it's a failure, it's a failure. We'll roll back. And, the old ways are still available, but we need to give this a little bit of time to work and see exactly what needs to be fixed. And if it can't be fixed, yeah, we'll roll back. But and you always validate. the concern with. I hear what you're saying. I completely understand. Nobody likes change, but we're working through the process and we hope you'll be patient with us. And, like I said, if it's not working, we will roll back to the old way.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
that's like the
understand.
30-day, and you have to just kind of validate people's concerns, and then you have to also, because I'm not answering all these phone calls, I'm not front face with patients, you have to be sure that the staff has somewhat of a script to follow or some guidelines as to how that they can reinforce the change, and you don't want people being like, "Oh, yeah, I know this is horrible. I don't know why they did this,"
Mm,
so you have to, like, kinda reel them in, like, "Okay, this is what you're gonna say." So, again, it's meetings and communication. You just have to have open communication, open dialogue, not only with your staff, but with your customers or patients that you're seeing.
yeah,
We
and I think
also do a lot of announcements, like, of anything new like that. We typically put them on the website. If it's something big, like the waiting rooms closing, we send out a blast to all of our patients and explain the process through Athena because you have that ability. So, I mean, key to anything is communication.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this rule from marketing that I think it applies here just as well as uh, they start hearing it only when you're getting sick of saying it. You know, you have to repeat it through various channels, and then it just starts getting stuck in their heads, or they're starting to realize that the change is real, whether a team member or a patient. It's really happening. It's not a fad, right?
Right.
And I think even with the Talkie agent, right? You put a notice on your site that you're implementing an AI receptionist. It's going to be a little bit different, working out some of the kinks. I think that was a great move for your team to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
communication. And that's why I say the first 30 days are the toughest because that's when you're gonna get most of the pushback because that's when you're saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah,
And, then finally, like I said, 60 days, it's gets a little bit better. By 90 days, the complaints are fewer and far between. And also with that, you're able to improve your processes and fix things that you didn't think were gonna be an issue. No matter how well you plan for a change, things are always gonna come up that you didn't plan for because you can't plan for everything. So you have to tweak and pivot your plan accordingly. So you
yeah.
have to be open to not only the change, but you have to be open to changing the course sometimes when things aren't working according to your plan.
Yeah, and I'm again thinking, firm but flexible, right? There's a
Right.
balance to be struck here. Tell me more about these meetings that you mentioned. Do you have any particular favorite tactics for these meetings? Do you want to set up a timeline on a whiteboard, maybe divide it by responsibility, who does what during the transition? What are your tips there?
No, we're not whiteboard people.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
we
So what kind of
usually
people
just
are you?
have I mean, I just have, I'll have a staff meeting, and then I'll have, like, department meetings with each department, and so I can go over how the change is gonna impact their department, but the biggest thing is that we are all a team, and even if it's, everybody's role impacts another role in the practice, so even though, AI talkies primarily for the front desk, but that doesn't mean that the people that are in the back office are gonna be impacted as well. Um, so it's like a big puzzle. All the pieces have to fit together. So I just usually give them handouts, guidelines, tips and tricks along the way, and we just have meetings and then like with, when we implemented Jessica, we have a Athena text going on that when she started, I started it called Jessica's on Duty. The whole thing has pretty much followed my 90-day rule.
Yeah,
But we
yeah,
did do a lot of work up front, and that was primarily on me and, our phone supervisor. We did a lot of, um, scenarios testing. I know Allie was probably like, "I don't know how much more testing we could do," but he was very patient with me because I wanted
yeah.
to feel like we were like 80 to 90% ready to go before we released it, but there were only so many. I mean, you can't come up with every scenario, so
Yeah,
you kinda have to just rip the Band-Aid off and think that
at
it's
some
good
point.
enough,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna have to tweak what's not working.
Yeah, exactly. And for context, Ali is a member of our Talkie team, our
Yep,
implementation team,
excellent.
and we do and we do guide our client practices through the implementation. Just like you said, right? To prepare for 90+ % of the scenarios. Some of them still happen in practice, right? But we try to launch very ready.
Yeah, it
Other
was
thing
like
that comes.
when we were
Huh?
going through that, it was like, "Oh, well, no," I'd be in the shower like, "Oh, I didn't think of this. I gotta go test this." So, you know, so
Yeah, yeah,
and then finally I
yeah.
was like, "I can't have any more shower moments. We just have to go."
That's amazing. That's so cool. Okay, so in your experience, what actually makes people come around? How does it happen that the change happens in their brains and their attitude? 2 months ago they were saying no way, and now they're saying okay, this actually works.
I think they just have to see that it is gonna work. They kinda have to trust the process a little bit, because no one likes change. It's not a comfortable thing, you know? But I ever since I've been in this role, I've always said, just because it's been done 100 years this way, it doesn't mean it's gonna be done another 100 years this way. So we
Exactly.
need to, like, look and we need to evolve, and we need to embrace change when it's applicable and it's gonna improve workflow, bottom line, work-life balance. I think also leading by example, not being there are some people that don't like change and they're not gonna change, and they're just because it worked 100 years, we're gonna keep going that path. And I think that people that have that mindset aren't setting up themselves or their entity for success. You have to be
Yeah.
open to change. I mean, you
And
can't
I
teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, exactly. And I assume, but I would love to validate with you that, having this regular contact with your peer group also helps build this confidence, right? Because you can at least, discuss some of these ideas with your peers. It at least gives you a little bit of confidence. If somebody else is doing it, I can do it kind of sooner. But if you never have that contact with your peers, you feel really alone with spearheading that kind of change. So I wonder if this
Right.
helps you here as well.
Sometimes my peers are think I'm kinda crazy, so
Ah, the other way around, huh?
I don't know that, I mean, even, like, when we did the central phones, I
Hmm.
had peers, managers calling me like, "How does this work? How did you do this?" You know? I mean, I had people come and observe how we worked, and how it they had to, like, kinda see it before they would believe it. So, I have been on the front line of a lot of things like that are newer thoughts, I guess, in the marketplace here. We do have kind of like there's a big group, like 28 plus practices, but then we have another smaller group, probably six other office managers that will trade things. Like somebody will say, like, "Oh, this I'm having this issue with coding. Is anybody having this issue?" And we kind of have a back door discussion. So
Hmm.
a lot of that, you know, some things are resolved that way. Um, and, sometimes it's like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." "That's great." "Tell me more about it." So I'm like, I'm not saying that I'm like the guru of all change, but, you have to be open to listening to other peers
Yeah.
and receptive to their advice. And also, if it could be too, they're doing something you thought about, but they're more into the change process or whatever it is, and then you can see, oh, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and you can tweak that if you wanna adopt it.
But I am hearing that you're more typically the inspiration rather the inspired one, and that's how you know, watchers and listeners, that we've got a thought leader on the show. So I'll say that. No, it sounds really great. So thank you for expanding on that. And while I still have you, I wanted to also ask you about something a little bit different. So I think it's been a while since I had an opportunity to talk with somebody who's like so close to the actual front desk work, and I wonder if we could get some tips out of you specifically for managing like a front desk team. You've got, people on the phone who maybe are like meaner than, they might be in person. You've got them stretched thin. You've got the burnout in the picture. how do you help them? How do you support the front desk team? And what kind of advice would you have to somebody else in a similar situation?
The front desk team, they probably have the hardest job in the practice,
Oh,
because if they're not doing their job well, they don't have good customer service. They would typically be the first impression of the practice. So typically people remember the first impression or the last
mm,
impression. So if your first impression, you get somebody that's nasty on the phone because they've worked many hours, you don't know what's going on in their personal life. They're just stretched thin. That can be detrimental to the practice. And if they're not doing a good job, you're not getting a patient scheduled. And if you're not getting patients scheduled, you're not getting any revenue. Again, I like money. So we need to keep the patient visits coming in. And
right.
that needs to be done by people that, you know, at least like their job or are, friendly, customer service oriented. I look for when I'm hiring somebody that has had customer service experience, not necessarily medical experience, because I'm going to tell you some of my best hires have been people that have been in retail. Bartenders are really good. Waitresses
Oh,
are
okay.
really good. Um, because they have to deal with all kinds of things. So they can typically handle somebody that's nasty on the phone because people are going to be nastier on the phone than in person. I don't know how many times they'll come in and be like, "Oh, such and such was just really nasty. She might be mean when she comes in, but when she comes in, I'll warn them downstairs or at the back that, this one's might be mad." And also
Mm,
you have to realize too, we're dealing with pediatrics, so we're dealing with parents. You don't
of
know if
course.
that parent has been up all night, 2 nights in a row with a sick kid. They're just at the end of their rope, and nothing you're gonna say to them is gonna make them happy. Sometimes you have to just accept that, and you just have to try to be the best person that you can be when you're dealing with that situation. But typically, if they're nasty on the phone, they'll come in, they're sweet as pie, especially if you've told a doctor, they're never mean to a doctor. They can be a wicked witch on the phone to the phone staff, but then when they get in here and they're like, "Oh, yeah," sweet as pie. So it's really I think that you have to it takes a special person too to be able to kinda take that on the phone. Um, and that was one of the things that I said about Jessica. Um, Jessica's not gonna be mean. Jessica's
Yeah,
gonna just take it. They can tell her she's an idiot. She doesn't care. Uh,
that's definitely an
you know?
advantage. Yeah.
So, also Jessica doesn't call in. Jessica doesn't take vacation. So, Jessica is all around pretty good.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's definitely an advantage,
yeah,
the
yeah,
patience, right, doesn't have another phone call coming in. I mean,
right.
the AI can do, simultaneous calls, easy, right, but it never affects the call, currently happening. And I love how he mentioned I mean, a couple of things, right? One is you keep, emphasizing this empathy, aspect of it, right? You don't
Right.
know what kind of day they've had, and I really, sympathize, especially with pediatrics. I remember when my son was really, really little, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of stress, so yeah,
Especially with a
definitely.
first time parent, you
Yeah,
you you can they people can tell you all you want what it's gonna be like to be that parent, but until you're experiencing it day in and
yeah,
day out, you don't have no idea, and you don't actually know how you're gonna react to it. You might think you're the calmest person, but you got a baby screaming its head off 20 20 out of 24 hours, you're gonna be at your wit's end when you call in, and you're not gonna want anybody to question you or, you don't know what's gonna set you off. So,
yeah,
I mean, I think that's a lot of what you have to try to like you said, empathy. You have to have a lot of empathy. And so and it is like we talked about, it is a position where burnout is huge. So I think with us having the hybrid work schedule, the flexible 4-day work week, and we have a pretty good PTO policy. So they do accrue enough time that they can have pretty good work life balance which I think helps with the longevity that we have here.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and definitely, I was never as scared in my life as when I was scared for my son. So, any last words of advice within this segment, sort of, for anybody running a front desk team, how to deal with like the difficult situations, or if somebody's been like put to the ringer, send them home early. Is that even an option? Like, what else comes to mind?
Typically, I really haven't sent anybody home early because, I mean, there have been times, I mean, over the course of my career here, there have been times when a person has come in and said, "I can't take this anymore today.
Hmm.
I'm gonna," and then I just don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm at my wit's end. I'm like, "Well, you want to take a break? Do you want to go home? How can you handle this situation?" Because you have to figure if somebody's at that point, they're not gonna be doing a good job anyway. So it's better that they either go home or take a break of some sort. Um, the other thing that a lot of times I'll get with my front desk staff is, "I'm not really feeling well enough to come to work, but can I work from home?" And my practice is, if you're not feeling well enough to come to work, then you're not well enough to do your job. So they have to
I
take
see.
the day off because, yeah, so they don't feel that great. They're gonna sit at home in their pajamas and have their head down, are they gonna really be working? So I use if you can't come to the office, you can't work. I think if you're that sick, you shouldn't be working anyway. You need to take care of yourself and listen to your body and rest. Again, I just try to be flexible and I try to be empathetic to my team as well. I try to put myself in their shoes. It's been a while, but I did have young kids, and it's sometimes you just have to let them take care of their kids. And if you're a parent and your kid's sick, you're not gonna you're gonna be worried about that your child over your job. So, and rightfully so. And like I said before, family has to take priority. This is a job. The practice is gonna stay whether you stay at home or you come into the office.
Absolutely understood, and thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. I think this is a really inspiring episode we've recorded here. Shame it's almost at an end. Last question, insurance question from myself is there anything else that you would like to add to what we discussed? For peers like you, any other piece of advice that I failed to ask about that you would like to add while we
Well,
close out the
I
episode?
just want to reinforce one of the probably the best books that I was given by a colleague when I first started in this role. Because again, I'm a CPA, I'm a numbers person. CPAs usually don't like people. I used to always say that I was a CPA that liked people, but that was
Okay.
until I had to work with people. And I realized that people aren't
Okay.
always that great. So I was given a book called Crucial Communications, which I really try to implement day in, day out. I mean, I'm not perfect at it, but it just emphasized the importance of open communications, listening. You have to listen. You can't just talk. And that's one of the things I think people have a hard time doing is listening and comprehending what the other person's saying. I think if
That's
there was
great.
a lot more listening and communication, there would be a lot less problems.
Yeah,
And that
yeah, we
book
always
is
love a
really
good
helpful.
yeah, we always love a good, book recommendation on the show here on scaling practice management. It reminds me of my favorite book, one of my favorite books, but one of the kind of self-development books that I read the earliest in my life and career, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mhm.
One of them was I wanted to say the first, but I didn't think it was the first. No, but one of them was in terms of dealing with people, seek first to understand, then to be understood. That really stuck with me,
Yeah,
as a role. Of course, definitely, we'll put the book you mentioned as well in the show notes. That's one I haven't read, but it'll be on my list. I've got a longer and longer reading list from this show, and I'm happy about it.
yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Well, and I think too, like I said, you have to give respect to get respect, and I think people forget that as well. Um, so I think that's one of the things that I've always tried to do. You can't just come in and be like, "It's my way or the highway." You have to be open to listening to
Right.
other people's input. It might be my way anyway, but I will listen to you.
Yeah, yeah. At least hear them out, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
totally understood. All right. Well, thank you. That'll be the last question for today, Lisa. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you and follow you if they want to get in touch with you, maybe dig more into these topics?
Um, I'm I'm old again, so, I'm on LinkedIn, but that's pretty much it. So,
Okay. Okay. So we'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Link to ESD Pediatric, of course, as well. If you're in that area, then highly recommend them. And if you call them, you'll hear Talkie's AI
yep,
Jessica and let
Jessica
us know how
will
that.
be on the job,
Yeah, Jessica's on duty. Exactly.
on
Exactly.
duty, on duty.
As for today, thank you, Lisa, so much for coming on the show. Wonderful conversation.
Yep,
Really set the
thanks for
mood for
having
me.
me
Yeah.
on my first ever podcast. So,
Yes, what an honor. What an honor. I hope this is not the last. I recommend you for more podcasts like this. And thank you, watchers and listeners, so much for joining us here today. This has been Scaling Practice Management. I have been Jakub Greitsar, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye, everyone.